Welcome to the Working Tools Podcast, where today we will be interviewing Very Worshipful Brother Clayton LaVigne on his thoughts, on our thoughts, on observing the craft.
Ladies and gentlemen, brethren all, welcome to the Working Tools Podcast, a casual conversation around Freemasonry. First, it's important to note that our thoughts and opinions are our own and do not reflect those of our Grand Lodge or respective craft or concordant bodies. Please connect with us and ask questions via our website at theworkingtoolspodcast.com.
Today on the Working Tools Podcast, we have our four usual hosts, Very Worshipful Brother David Colbeth from King Solomon number 60 in Auburn, Washington, Worshipful Brother Jarrod Dunham from Penticton 147 in Penticton, BC, Worshipful Brother Stephen Chung from Prince Charles 153, in lovely Kelowna, British Columbia, and I'm Matt Appel. I'm a member of Mill Creek 243, and we meet in Montlake Terrace, Washington. And we have a special guest with us today, Very Worshipful Brother Clayton LaVigne, who is the Assistant Grand Secretary and a member of Tenino number, I've already forgotten the number, 67?
86.
86, sorry. Tenino number 86 here in Washington. And so we finished up our internal sort of discussion on our thoughts on the Observing the Craft book. And we got as we always say at the end of the episode, we're happy to hear from our listeners and see if anyone has any way that, how to say this, that we may have erred once or twice. I'm sure it's happened. I can't think of ever an instance, but I'm sure it's happened at least once. And so Clayton replied to our plea for input and had some thoughts on our commentary. So I guess I sort of want to start, Clayton. Welcome to the show, and two, sort of what's the background? I know you obviously you listen to the show. What is your interaction with it, I guess is the question.
Okay, so I commute 1 hour to work. It's a 2-hour round trip, and so rather than just listening to just random stuff or talk shows and stuff, what I do is I take your podcast and I download it, and then I put it on my phone, and then I listen to it during the commute. That way, it's something constructive. So as I'm doing this, I'm listening to you guys' commentaries, your opinions, stuff like that. But this one, it got to the point to where I can actually remember where I was on the Rainier Road on my way home when some of the things were coming up there, to where it was this. It didn't really anger me as much as it was like, I have a different take on the situation. So therefore I listened to it the rest of the way until I got back home. And then I just started thinking about it. And then I thought, well, how do I make a comment on this? So I was going through the different routes and I was trying to find out which way to comment. And I just said, out of heck with it, I'm just going to email Dave. And so I fired off this email that I really didn't intend for him to share with the rest of you guys, but he did.
Sorry.
And so I'm sitting there and I saw the response and I saw you guys' email addresses. I'm going, oh no. So I thought, okay, I'm probably going to hear about this from Matt, and I know I'm going to hear about it from Dave. And so I didn't know where it was going to go. And then so I just got invited onto the show here very recently. And so here I am.
Well, thanks for coming. I will say you've now paid us the greatest compliment that I've heard about the show so far, which is constructive. I will write that down. And usually it's who listens to this Drek, and oh my gosh, this is terrible. Constructive is awesome.
And Matt, I took that as a compliment too, but a more important comment and compliment is that he downloads it and carries it with him. I love it. That's awesome. Nice to hear.
Thank you.
Yeah, so you get it through one of the audio channels, right?
Right. So there's numerous options, just like what David had mentioned. So you got like Stitcher, good grief, Appel, and stuff like that. So I downloaded off of Podtail.
Yeah. Very cool. So he hasn't actually have seen us do the show necessarily. He knows what we look like, but he probably didn't really know what you guys look like other than the thumbnails. But so this is really the first visual of how it all works. But yeah, just a Zoom get together and hang out and chat. Real simple.
Yeah.
Well, we do really appreciate the interaction, and the constructive feedback was awesome. I read the email, and it's like, hey, this guy's been around. He understands what he's talking about. He paid attention to what we were saying, and he's pretty much banged on when on your opinion of masonry over the latter years. That's for sure,
Thank you.
in my opinion, too.
Yeah, the only thing. Go ahead. The only thing I was going to say is that in the conversation or the message was about, just to kind of give you a synopsis, those that haven't seen it, of course, or haven't heard about it, that, and correct me if I'm wrong, Clayton, is that the first part of it was kind of, well, the concordant groups, especially the Scottish Rite and the York Rite, are meant to be the universities of masonry, or the higher learning of masonry. And so, as you described it, the entered apprentice might be a elementary school, the fellow craft maybe the middle school, and the master mason a high school, and then the higher education would be, the postgraduate education would be Scottish Rite or York Rite or something like that. One idea. And that the concordant groups play a significant role in a mason's development as a mason. And can correct me if I'm wrong, feel free to jump in. And I think that, according to Hammer's comments, it's really kind of the opposite. He really thinks the concordant group should go away. I'm not seeing a nod from Jarrod, but I think that's his agreement. Oh, I got a smile. Okay, I must be on the right way. Usually I'll get a nod from from the guys. Okay, over on the right track here. And so I did find it interesting how you talked about the shrine being, and you used a lot of school analogies here, but the shrine being the sports program. And I thought, that's a unique way to look at it. I never thought about, they always say that the shrine of the Playboys of masonry, and they have a lot of fun and they party and whatever. But in this analogy, it's the sports program, the one that is the face of the school that people donate money to. And I get that. The football team, you have a homecoming parade for the football team. You don't have a homecoming parade for the science team.
Right.
Generally.
Well, maybe down there. You guys are weird in the States about how fond you are of football.
Right. Right. But it is true that, that is the face, like, for example, down where Matt and Dave and I live. So you mentioned the University of Washington. Do you think of the medical program? Do you think of the science programs? Do you think of postgrad? No, you think of the Huskies. Oh yeah, UW, the Huskies football team. That is what it is. Woof woof, and that stuff. So it is kind of the face, and that's just one of hundreds of examples. So
down there.
Okay, well,
no, sports teams up here in Canada, it's totally different. Our sports teams are not the focus of our universities.
So you don't have
in fact, you would have a hard time. You would have a hard time finding quite a lot of people at universities to even know what the name of their team is.
I have the University of British Columbia, Okanagan up here, and got the Okanagan College in several campuses. I couldn't tell you the name of any of their sport teams. The only one I do hear of is the Okanagan Sun, but that's about it.
But that's an actual team,
right?
Yeah,
not related to any schools.
Yeah. But right. Once again, we digress.
Yes,
I was going to say
I'm learning something here, but that's cool. Yeah.
But it was interesting your analogy of this, breaking it into a school system and whatnot. I don't know. I thought it was interesting. I thought, well, after contemplating it for a bit, I thought, well, no, really, most of all of the teaching should really be in Blue Lodge, and we could probably pick the brain of Jarrod with respect to the York and Scottish Rite and all their degrees afterwards, more and their purposes. But I kind of think most of our teachings really are in the first 3 degrees, and but I did like the analogies.
Yeah, one of my frustrating things about some of especially the York Rite guys in our lodge, there's one in particular, and he will constantly say, well, if you really want to know the secret, come to us. And I think, shouldn't you be the one giving us the teachings? If you have all this knowledge, shouldn't you be the ones coming into the Blue Lodge and really teaching us? And because in theory, there's not supposed to be anything we can't learn. And when I mentioned that one day, he said, "Oh no, there's things that we can't teach you." I thought, well, then what are you? I mean, we're supposed to be master masons. We're supposed to be able to know everything. And so, and if nothing else, why not come in and get us interested? Come and teach us something that tantalizes us and gets us to want more.
Well, what really started for me about the idea of the school analogy was that the Scottish Rite was always fancying himself as the University of Freemasonry. Oh, we're the university. We're the highest. We're the guys who are doing all the studies and all the papers and all the stuff like that. And so that's kind of where I led this whole school analogy from. That there is a school. We're all learning something, and like what Steve was saying, that you can learn the bulk of the stuff you're going to learn in the craft degrees, just like most of the basic stuff you're going to learn in your everyday life. How to count, how to hold a job, how to speak, and all this stuff is covered in your basic school system. So by the time you have a high school diploma, you should be able to get out there, start a family, hold a job, do all this kind of stuff. So you don't really need to attend or be a member of the concordant bodies any more than you really need to have any extended education. You want to, that's great, but you don't necessarily have to. You can hold a job and become a productive member of society. So
you guys must have a totally different school system down there, because they went to this kid's school and I was like, well, what about teaching them how to write, teaching them how all these other things and all these basic fundamentals to life? And they go, oh no, they can ask Google that.
Well, I was kind of doing some old school thinking from because I'm about Dave and Matt's age. I grew up in the 80s, and we still did the reading, writing, arithmetic without a Google kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and part of the thing about the education factor really is making the time to analyze the lessons in each of the degrees, the lectures, the pieces, the components, and really delving into it, right? And that really takes a good education officer from a lodge to kind of help prod that along, I think.
Yeah. Magic. Dave?
I say as if I'm magic. Steve's the education officer for his lodge.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I am. And for the district. And so I've actually been taking pieces of the 3 degrees with me and prepared to present any one of them at the functions I'm going to, because really that's what I think is missing is, nobody's taking the time to do that education, and though we say that, it's there for them to learn, if nobody points them in the right direction and helps them, find their way to the information, they're never going to find it, right? And so I figure give them a little push in that way, right? But you're right. There are lots of guys who say, well, go into the York Rite or the Scottish Rite, and there's so much more to learn there. Well, it's different stuff, right? It's different, and so that's my effort to try to bring the focus back to the education on the first 3 degrees.
Yeah, my biggest pet peeve with all of the concordant bodies is that they seem to fail to recognize the supremacy of the craft degrees. And the analogy, unfortunately, that you used of using that they're in universities implies that the degrees in the concordant bodies are superior to and not just other than. And it's what normally, because it's been my experience, and that is how a lot of Masons view them, is that, oh, I've 32nd degree Scottish Rite, or I can't remember and I'm like, yeah, but we're all Master Masons and there ain't anything greater than that.
Templar, yeah. When a family member talks about their history or their family history, their grandpa or whatever, they don't say he was a Master Mason. That's not the big thing. It's, he was a 32nd degree or 33rd degree.
Yeah.
Whatever, or Knights Templar.
Yeah. And
Okay, so for me, okay, I see what now. So I don't really back to this analogy about a real life analogy that there's some people that may say that a college educated person is superior or higher knowledge than a high school graduate or somebody who's been through a few trades. But in the end, we're all citizens. We all vote. We all have we may it's different. It's like what Steve said. It's different. You have a different kind of set of knowledge, different kind of focus on some things. I suppose now some people may think that way. I will have to concede that point. I'm not one of them, but I see where you're coming from in that regard. And I think that's another one that kind of makes those concordant bodies a distraction. Kind of goes back to what David was saying concerning, hey, we join us. We have something that you don't know, but you have to join us to find out. Well, it's the incorrect approach. Everything that I've learned, I try to use it as a resource to help, to assist these new guys. And that's where I'm accruing knowledge. That way I can assist other guys, new Masons at the Blue Lodge level, not necessarily at a concordant body level. It's at the Blue Lodge level, back to the basic kind of stuff that Steve was talking about. But that's my angle on it. But the majority may be in the case of what Jarrod's talking about, unfortunately.
And so when we talk about, the basics in the Blue Lodge level, speaking of the book that we were reviewing there, what's your
calling it the
thought on that?
basics.
What's that?
Stop calling it the basics. It is Freemasonry. It's not the basics.
Sorry.
It is Freemasonry.
My bad terminology there. So where I was going with that though is, what are your thoughts on the concept of an observant lodge?
Okay, it's because that's in the earlier stuff. Because there's some of the guys that are down, because I'm down in southwestern Washington State, where the observant stuff is kind of unfortunately it's leaning more up towards north, up there where Dave and Matt are, and down here we're just trying to keep a lodge going as opposed to like an observant lodge where we're trying to do with the stuff like what has been demonstrated in the previous episodes and in earlier chapters of the book. It's tough. We're just trying to get new guys in, trying to open up a lodge. Do you want to expound a little bit more specifically, Steve, on this?
Well, when they talk about the observant lodge and they talk about everybody being focused on being well dressed, on doing their ritual work to perfection, on holding themselves to the higher standards in everything they do in lodge, right? Well, my thought is that if we are more worried about just bringing the numbers in so we can get the numbers and then focus on it, we've spent all that time teaching these guys about more lackadaisical approach to lodge, if you will, and not being focused on still the importance of doing ritual work to a particular standard, to like for example, you end up when we were doing that type of focus on just working on getting numbers, building the guys, you get guys working on their prove ups and they say, well, I don't really have to have it perfect because I just say word and somebody tells me the next line I got to remember or repeat, right? And that's what they experienced in their degree because the lodge wasn't focused on doing things to a certain standard.
So this can go two routes. Because I'm a member of 3 lodges. The one behind me is my home lodge, to where we got a new guy that came in, and his classmate got him in. He was a master mason already, and so they were trying to prove him up, but he was only about a third of the way. And he said, "Well, that's all as far as I can go." And his other guy said, "Well, hey, do you think that's good enough for him to get his next degree?" And I got up and I said, I had to be judicious and diplomatic on how I basically said no, that we got to do like what you said. He's on the right path. He needs to keep going. This is not, and the other guy, well, but he tried. Look he got to this far. And I said, if he got this far, we'll wait a few more months. Let's keep going. We can get it the rest of the way. If he's made this much of an effort, he needs to keep going. So now my other lodge in Centralia, so these guys come in they expect they figure that we're going to be observant, that we're going to be demanding excellence. So that I like that, because then these guys say, what do I need to do? What do I need to do right? How do I want to do? I don't want to cheat anybody. I don't want to cheat my grandfather. I don't want to cheat the brothers before me. How do I do this right? And I like that, because then it brings out who I really want to be. This is what you need to do. This is a time frame. Don't worry about it. This is what you need to do. And if you do it, we can move you forward. And that brings up my game, because, it's kind of like we can all fall into that trap. But when you got guys there that they're saying, hey, I want to be excellent, it's like, good. And that's really encouraging for me. So, and we're trying to get that kind of going with all the lodges that I'm active in. Things are turning around. We need to ramp it up. So, yeah. So I see where you're coming from, and that's where we are, at least down in my section of the state.
You think that even the smaller lodges or the more rural lodges, that those guys currently, the ones that are joining, are because of the current culture, but those that may come in that don't know anything about the culture, if you get a lead off the internet or someone knocks on your door and doesn't know any of the guys in the lodge, I'd be curious to see the difference in the new members of those that are sort of recruited from friends and people they know from the community versus someone that comes in cold and thinks of what Freemasonry might be, and then he sees what it is happening in that lodge, in a smaller rural lodge, and thinks, oh, this is not what I thought Masonry was going to be. But then maybe there's nobody knocking at the door either. I don't know specifically about that. I haven't done any research, but I would imagine that there's a difference. And I see it even in our own lodge, that there's a difference in the guys that come in many times through sphere of influence. And you can kind of tell, oh, yeah, they're very similar. And maybe they're a little more social and not quite as observant. I think Steve's comment about the high quality dress and high quality ritual. Yes, those are natural aspects, but the last part of your sentence, Steve, was, I think, the most accurate. It comes from chapter 2, the first paragraph. He says, careful attention. What is observance? It's careful attention to and practice of what might be considered the essential tenets of the discipline. The effort to do everything involved with the discipline as correctly as possible to the best of your ability. I think that really sums up what observance is. And then you can apply that to the different elements of what we consider craft masonry. Yeah. What's the expectation? We expect them to look nice. Does that mean that every lodge has to be a tuxedo lodge? No. Does that mean every lodge has to be perfect lodge in the ritual? It doesn't have to be, but it should be. They should be striving towards that, right?
Yeah, making that effort. Because like with my Tenino, it's a rural lodge. Got about 36 members, town 1,500, and these guys come in, and it's more of just that kind of that small town, small little atmosphere, and it's kind of more amalgamated kind of thing, and it's more welcoming in a way, because it's kind of like a small family kind of situation. And whereas the larger lodge in Centralia, those inquirers come in, the older ones, they understand that you're going to have a variance of personalities, whereas the younger guys may be a little bit overwhelmed by the variance of personalities. So just as us. So, but I think that would apply to any fraternal organization, actually.
Yeah. Do you think there's too much? Go ahead, Steve. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
That's okay. Yeah, no, I do recognize that the smaller lodges do struggle more that way, but I think that the setting those expectations to the seekers before they come in, that's where it all starts, right? And then you follow up with a good mentorship program, and that way, like, for example, we have a mentorship program that's very active in our lodge. So when a seeker comes in and goes through the experience and is looking at doing the prove up, we've got a coach that works with him. And prior to him coming to prove up in lodge, he does a practice prove up with a past master and the coach usually. so that we have a real good idea whether or not this guy is actually proficient enough to do that. And not only just repeat it, but to understand what he's saying. Like, ever since we've incorporated this method and had a really good coach, almost every single one of our guys proven up, it's like he wrote that prove up, right? And it makes the biggest difference, I believe, right?
So yeah, that's one of the things that we're kind of in a teething process in my home lodge, the rural lodge in Tenino, where you have that. Well, we have an idea of what needs to be done, but a lot of new guys. You got some guys that it's kind of clumsy right now, but they really want to make it. They really want to make it better. They want to improve on it, and so you get some of these guys coming in from the Olympia lodges up in Olympia, Washington, or they come up from the Centralia area and invite them, and they learn from them. So we're moving forward. We're not excellent yet, but we're working on it.
And I think that all of us, hopefully all Masons are working on their lodges and themselves to get a little closer to excellent, but some of us have a little further to go than others. With that said, Clayton, thank you very much for being here on the show. We'd like to have you back do you have time? You can stay we can record a second episode, or
I have all the time that you need. Yes.
Oh, you'll be sorry you said that.
That's for sure.
So with that, I tune in to our next episode where we'll continue our interview with Clayton. But for now, on behalf of David and Jarrod and Stephen and myself, and our special guest Clayton here, thank you all very much for listening to the Working Tools podcast, and we look forward to talking to you again soon. Goodbye.